The envelope looked harmless when my mother nudged it across the crisp linen tablecloth, her diamond ring flashing in the light as if she wanted the moment to sparkle. My sister leaned forward with her phone raised, pretending this was some cherished family milestone. Even the restaurant seemed to sense the shift. Voices dipped and the string quartet stalled mid-note as if waiting for a cue. But the envelope didn't hold a check, or a heartfelt card, or anything that resembled affection. Instead, it contained a typed letter, signed by all three of them, cutting me out of the family. That was my graduation gift. I folded the paper once, then again, keeping my face still. I didn't shout or cry. I simply rose from my chair with the letter pressed between my fingers. No dramatic exit, no accusations, just silence and the gravity of what they had handed me. They believed they had written the final chapter of my story. They had no idea they had only set the stage for their own. Stay with me. You'll understand how silence can rearrange everything. Growing up, I learned early that affection in our home was less emotion and more evaluation. My father, Charles Parker, viewed love like an investment portfolio, always calculating value and potential return. My mother, Diane, tracked appearances with the precision of a social strategist. And my sister, Avery, embodied exactly what they wanted. Smart enough to impress financially, polished enough to display publicly. Whenever there was a dinner party, I always came last in the introductions. My mother would glow with pride as she rested a careful hand on Avery's shoulder. Avery is a senior associate in New York, she'd announce, savoring the admiration that followed. Then her tone would lower slightly, almost like an afterthought. And this is Sydney. She's still studying. The pause always lingered, long enough to make the air tight, but short enough to seem polite. Guests responded with the same soft nod, a fleeting glance in my direction before turning back to their cocktails or conversations. I mastered the art of the small, forgettable smile. Our dining room itself felt like a stage. It smelled of cedar, polish, and quiet pressure. The chandelier scattered sharp bits of light over the crystal table, reflections that danced but never settled. While my father dissected market trends and my mother praised donors who mistook her ambition for generosity, I would trace those little shards of light and imagine myself anywhere else. Avery flourished in that environment. She knew exactly when to laugh, how to tilt her head, and how to glide through conversations as though she'd been trained for them since birth. Watching her sometimes felt like observing a controlled experiment. Every expression carefully placed, every gesture designed to earn approval. I was different. Most evenings, I worked behind the counter of a cafe near campus. The hiss and clatter of the espresso machine drowned out any pretense. Customers didn't care about lineage, social status, or whether I met someone's expectations. For a few hours each night, I could just exist without someone measuring my worth. And that, more than anything, was what my family never understood. Most customers wanted nothing more from me than a correctly made drink and their name spelled right on the cup. I liked the simplicity of that. It felt straightforward, clean, predictable, honest. No judgment, no comparisons, just tasks with measurable outcomes. One Sunday evening, after a long shift left my clothes smelling faintly of espresso, I walked into the kitchen to find Avery perched at the counter with her laptop open. My father was beside her, casually pouring wine as if they had been waiting for me. "We were just talking about you," he announced, swirling his glass. "Avery thinks you're wasting your time behind a coffee counter." Avery didn't lift her eyes from her screen. "It's not a waste, Dad. It's character building." Her voice was light enough to sound harmless, but the undertone was sharp, almost surgical. I let out a small laugh to mask the sting. "I'm paying my tuition," I reminded them. My father shrugged as though that detail barely mattered. "Degrees don't pay bills, Sydney. Numbers do. Don't forget that." For a moment, I wanted to remind him that I understood numbers far better than he ever realized. How I could break down systems, identify variables, run models in my sleep. But he had already turned back to Avery, his attention sliding away from me the way it always did. After that night, I stopped trying to insert myself into their conversations. Instead, I observed from the margins, collecting moments the way other people collected photographs. Quiet details made more sense to me than their constant performances. Every now and then, I let myself believe things might shift. When I received a national research scholarship, I emailed them the announcement, attached the press feature, highlighted the recognition. Then I waited. 6 hours later, my mother responded, "So proud of you, sweetheart. We have a gala tonight. Can we post about it tomorrow?" They never posted at all. That was the day something clicked into place. Something small, but irrevocable. In my family, attention was a form of currency, and I was the unpaid intern keeping the empire running with not even a line of credit in return. I remember the soft ring of the crystal glasses that night, each clink perfectly synchronized, as if the house itself toasted my invisibility. That was the moment I finally understood my position in this family, wedged somewhere between silence and proof. 2 days before graduation, a notification popped up in the family group chat. A reservation link. Maison Lumière, the same restaurant my mother reserved for every celebratory event that belonged to someone else. The message was short and cold. Pre-graduation dinner for Sydney. Dress appropriately. No exclamation point. No affection. Just another directive dressed up as a gesture. I opened the reservation page. My name wasn't included anywhere. The host's greeting read simply, "The Parker family, Charles, Diane, Avery." Leaving me off the list wasn't an oversight, it was deliberate. An hour later, Avery texted me privately. "Don't overthink it, it's just formatting." But I already knew. It wasn't formatting, it was foreshadowing. Formatting. The word clung to me long after Avery sent it. That was how my family viewed me, a line item in a document. Something that could be erased without altering the overall structure. A variable with no real impact. That night, I sat at my desk while the city lights flickered against the window like weak static trying to break through. My inbox overflowed with messages. Congratulations from professors, questions from classmates, notes from investors interested in my research. These were markers of progress, achievements that should have meant something. But when the people who shaped your sense of worth still evaluate you through silence, outside validation feels strangely hollow. I found myself scrolling through old family photos, vacations, holidays, charity events. My mother always stood with perfect posture, my father with his polished, measured smile, Avery with her well-rehearsed charm. And then there was me, usually near the edge of the frame, half cast in shadow, half noticed. It wasn't a new pattern. It was simply the first time I looked at it without clinging to hope that the picture would ever shift. The next morning, a new email lit up my screen. The university confirmed my speaking role at commencement. Attached was a nomination form from my mentor, Dr. Alvarez. She had put my name forward for the Young Leader in Technology award. Her note was brief but sincere. "This is your moment, Sydney. Own it quietly." Quietly. The words settled in my chest like something steady. Something real. It didn't ask me to perform. It didn't demand applause. It simply acknowledged who I already was. I closed the laptop and let the silence fill the room. Sunlight cut through the blinds in neat, geometric patterns. For the first time, I noticed how orderly everything had become around me. The coffee mug aligned with the edge of my notebook, papers stacked according to color, the clock ticking in a clean, reliable rhythm. That was when I realized my life wasn't spiraling or chaotic. It was structured, just not by my family anymore. I smiled then. A quiet smile. The kind you allow yourself when the evidence has already been gathered, and the conclusion has already been written. The night before the dinner, the city moved under a sheet of warm summer rain. My apartment windows fogged at the edges, trembling slightly each time a train passed below. Inside, every object was in its place. The order felt intentional, almost peaceful, like preparation rather than anxiety. And for the first time, I felt ready. Formatting. The word clung to me long after Avery sent it. That was how my family viewed me. A line item in a document. Something that could be erased without altering the overall structure. A variable with no real impact. That night, I sat at my desk while the city lights flickered against the window like weak static trying to break through. My inbox overflowed with messages. Congratulations from professors. Questions from classmates. Notes from investors interested in my research. These were markers of progress, achievements that should have meant something. But when the people who shaped your sense of worth still evaluate you through silence, outside validation feels strangely hollow. I found myself scrolling through old family photos, vacations, holidays, charity events. My mother always stood with perfect posture, my father with his polished, measured smile, Avery with her well-rehearsed charm. And then there was me, usually near the edge of the frame, half cast in shadow, half noticed. It wasn't a new pattern. It was simply the first time I looked at it without clinging to hope that the picture would ever shift. The next morning, a new email lit up my screen. The university confirmed my speaking role at commencement. Attached was a nomination form from my mentor, Dr. Alvarez. She had put my name forward for the Young Leader in Technology award. Her note was brief but sincere. "This is your moment, Sydney. Own it quietly." Quietly. The words settled in my chest like something steady, something real. It didn't ask me to perform. It didn't demand applause. It simply acknowledged who I already was. I closed the laptop and let the silence fill the room. Sunlight cut through the blinds in neat, geometric patterns. For the first time, I noticed how orderly everything had become around me. The coffee mug aligned with the edge of my notebook, papers stacked according to color, the clock ticking in a clean, reliable rhythm. That was when I realized my life wasn't spiraling or chaotic. It was structured, just not by my family anymore. I smiled then. A quiet smile, the kind you allow yourself when the evidence has already been gathered and the conclusion has already been written. The night before the dinner, the city moved under a sheet of warm summer rain. My apartment windows fogged at the edges, trembling slightly each time a train passed below. Inside, every object was in its place. The order felt intentional, almost peaceful, like preparation rather than anxiety. And for the first time, I felt ready. The papers on my desk were neatly aligned, and the soft blue glow from my screens lit the room with a calm, steady hue. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the scent rising warm and sharp, cutting cleanly through the murmur of the storm outside. My fingers tapped the keyboard in time with the rain against the windows, each keystroke quiet but intentional. Every data entry, every sorted document felt like a small, silent rebellion. Months earlier, I had stopped offering explanations for my choices. Explanations were for people hoping to be understood. Records, on the other hand, were for people who intended to be remembered. So I kept records, every scholarship confirmation, every award notification, every updated line of code for the system I'd spent a year refining. What started as a modest research assignment had grown into something meaningful, a route optimization platform for small logistics companies. Ethan handled the analytics. Maya crafted the user interface. And I, the barista with an MBA and a habit of observing patterns, had built the core algorithm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was functional, precise, and adaptable. The real turning point happened in the quietest hour of the night. I ran a simulation before dawn, expecting another marginal improvement. Instead, the model delivered a 12% reduction in fuel costs. I sat back and stared at the numbers on the screen. They weren't hypothetical, they weren't inflated. They were proof, clear, verifiable proof that the system worked. By the time the university hosted its startup symposium, Rootflow was polished and ready. Just before I stepped onto the stage, Dr. Alvarez placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't need to sell yourself," she told me. "Just show them what it does, let the data speak." So I did. The applause that followed started politely, almost out of obligation, but it shifted quickly, growing fuller, warmer, real. In the audience, a man in a tailored gray suit watched with an expression that was neither theatrical nor dismissive, just focused. Nathan Cole, CEO of Northbridge Logistics. After the presentation, he approached me with a calm professionalism. "You've built something scalable," he said, reading the charts with quiet interest. "But more importantly, something fair." Fair? It was a word I hadn't heard used sincerely in my direction for a long time. We met twice more. During our third meeting, he slid a slim folder across the table. Inside was a letter of intent. Northbridge wanted to acquire Rootflow for $6.2 million and offer me a director-level position after graduation. I didn't rush to sign anything. I went through every clause and every subclause, reading slowly, checking each detail for hidden traps or compromises. I wanted to be certain the system I had created, the one built from effort, precision, and long stretches of silence rather than inherited advantage, would remain intact. When I finally did sign, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like equilibrium, as though something in my life had quietly clicked back into place. From that moment on, I began assembling my own archive. Digital copies of every document, all timestamped and encrypted. Transaction receipts, licensing agreements, payment logs. An organized paper trail designed not just to tell a story, but to seal it. Evidence without emotion. On the night the final transfer confirmation appeared in my inbox, I printed the letter. The quiet hum of the printer and the clean slide of the paper coming out felt more satisfying than applause ever could. That was when I opened the family group chat for the first time in months. The most recent message came from my mother. A photo of Avery at a law firm gala sparkling under chandeliers, captioned, "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." I typed my response with steady fingers. "Graduation dinner confirmed. I'll be there." New emojis. New clarification. Just a statement. After sending it, I did what I always did before turning a corner in my life. I cleaned. Every object found its place, every surface cleared, every edge aligned. On my desk, I arranged 3 things with careful symmetry: my offer letter, my degree folder, and a small envelope I had kept for years. Inside was a faded birthday card from my mother, the handwriting elegant and soft to my little dreamer. I slid the new documents beneath it, fresh ink resting under old sentiment. Midnight approached without fanfare. I closed my laptop, finished the last sip of cold coffee, and looked out at the city lights rippling across the river. I thought about the approaching dinner, their polished smiles, the photos they'd pose for, the practiced choreography of a family accustomed to performance. For the first time, I felt no fear at all. They would arrive with their envelope, certain it would define my future. What they didn't realize was that I had already signed something far more permanent: my own independence. I fell asleep with that thought resting quietly on my mind. The rain had finally passed, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt intentional, almost ceremonial. I woke before sunrise the next morning, the soft light creeping across my desk and catching on the silver clip that held my signed contracts. For a moment, I rested my fingertips on the stack of papers, steadying myself, anchoring the moment. I didn't dress for my family. I dressed for the record. A clean blazer, hair pulled back, muted colors. An outfit that didn't ask to be noticed, but guaranteed it would not be forgotten. Before leaving, I set my coffee cup beside my laptop exactly 1 inch from the edge. Habit. Order. Proof. Then I locked the door behind me. Chicago's streets were still slick, the pavement reflecting the sky like a smeared mirror. As I passed a store window, my reflection glanced back, calm, centered, composed. Someone I recognized, possibly for the first time. When I reached Maison Lumière, I paused outside the glass entrance. Through the doors, I could already see the soft glimmer of chandeliers, the sharp outline of my mother's posture, the familiar angle of Avery's head as she adjusted her phone for the perfect photo. I took one slow, steady breath. They believed tonight belonged to them, that the narrative was theirs to control. They didn't know the story had already been rewritten, signed, sealed, and time-stamped long before I stepped through those doors. I wasn't entering their performance. This time, I was walking into evidence. The hostess approached with a polished smile. "Parker party?" she asked. Her tone remained professional, but the flicker of hesitation in her eyes revealed she already knew my name wasn't on the reservation. "Yes," I said simply. "They're expecting me." Inside, the air carried the scent of truffle butter layered under something colder, an expensive kind of indifference. My family sat at the far corner beneath the halo of an ornate chandelier. My mother lifted her hand in a graceful wave, as though welcoming me to a celebration rather than a judgment. Avery raised her phone slightly, angling it to capture the moment. "Sydney, darling," my mother cooed, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "We have something special for you." A server approached and placed a crisp white envelope beside my plate. My father cleared his throat with the kind of authority he liked to rehearse in boardrooms. "It's time we all move forward," he announced, as though declaring a merger. My mother's smile grew wider, bright enough to hide the intention behind it. But not from me. From all of us, my mother added, as if the gesture were some kind of blessing. Avery kept her camera angled perfectly, capturing every detail, the envelope gliding across the white linen, the way my face didn't give them the reaction they expected. I opened it slowly, deliberately. The paper inside was thick, embossed, official in a way that felt almost theatrical. We, the undersigned, hereby release and relinquish all familial obligations and ties with Sydney Parker. Each signature sat beneath the statement in flawless loops, practiced, polished, familiar. The timing was not an accident. This was their version of a graduation gift. The table went still. They waited for a reaction, shock, tears, a scene to justify their script. But the real drama had already happened months ago, alone, off stage. I folded the letter once, then again. I set it gently beside the coffee spoon. "Thank you," I said, my voice even and controlled. Avery blinked at me, suddenly unsure. "You're thanking us?" I met her eyes properly for the first time in years. For the closure. Something in the room tightened, stretched thin like glass about to crack. My father shifted in his chair. My mother's hand paused above her wineglass. Avery slowly lowered her phone, uncertain what she was recording anymore. "Sydney," my mother said quietly, "you don't have to make this harder." But I was already reaching into my bag. I pulled out a folder, the same shade of gray Nathan Cole wore the day he handed me the contract. I set it on the table and opened it toward them. Under the glow of the chandelier, the Northbridge Logistics letterhead shone like a verdict. Below it was my name. Director of Data Operations, Route Flow, Integration Lead. For a moment, no one spoke. The string quartet in the background drifted into a new arrangement, unaware they were providing the soundtrack to a burial. Of expectations, of control, of an old version of me. Avery leaned forward and skimmed the page quickly. "This is yours?" "Yes." My father's frown appeared, the one he reserved for poorly performing assets. "You sold it?" "I built it," I corrected softly. "Then I sold it. The deal closed last week." My mother's composure faltered, her practiced elegance slipping at the edges. We didn't know." "I know." It was the first time I had ever seen genuine shock cross her face. Avery's phone hung loosely in her hand now, the recording light off. My father reached for his wine, but the glass clicked lightly against the marble as his grip trembled. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't smile. I simply rose from my seat. "You can keep the letter," I said, sliding their disownment envelope back across the table. "I already have my own," I said. The words didn't need force. They carried their own quiet strike. I heard Avery murmur something behind me. A warning, a question, maybe an apology, but I didn't look back. The restaurant's soft piano carried through the room, smoothing over the silence that had settled behind me like dust. At the doorway, I paused. The glass reflected the city's lights, bright and restless, and in that reflection I could still see them. The three of them seated at the table, suspended in their curated world, shiny, composed, and painfully hollow. It didn't surprise me. It didn't even sting. Outside, the cold hit harder than I expected, sharp with the promise of coming rain. It smelled like the kind of night that wipes things clean. I checked my phone as I walked. Messages from Northbridge. Alerts from news outlets already reporting the acquisition. Confirmation in neat timestamps. Every piece of evidence that my life had long since diverged from the one they tried to control. The envelope in my hand felt strangely light now, nothing more than ink on paper. They had withdrawn from me years ago. Tonight, I simply handed their silence back. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a chill that cleared everything lingering from that table. The voices, the staged concern, the weight of old expectations. The city rose around me with its glowing towers and flickering streetlights, alive in a way they had never allowed me to be. I didn't hurry. My footsteps folded into the steady hum of cars passing by, each step easing something inside me. By the time I reached my apartment, dawn was already thinning the night sky. A pale wash of morning slipped through the blinds, scattering light across the floor in soft, uneven stripes. I placed the envelope on the counter, right beside my framed degree. Their disownment letter looked almost insignificant next to the Northbridge contract. 2 pieces of paper, 2 versions of my name. One they revoked, one they could never touch. I made coffee the way I always did, the slow pour grounding me. The mug tapped gently against the tabletop, a small, familiar rhythm that felt more like my heartbeat than anything I'd felt at that dinner. I didn't bother rereading their letter. It had already marked its moment. It was the exact point in time where I stopped trying to earn a place at a table that had never been set for me. My phone vibrated once. A message from Avery. "We didn't mean it like that. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. The typing dots appeared, vanished, returned. I let them disappear for good. Then I set the phone face down. Some messages aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to fade into the quiet they created. Outside, the light warmed. The city stretched awake, delivery trucks rumbling by, runners pacing their morning routes. The familiar rhythm of a world moving forward. And for the first time, I felt myself moving with it. I pushed the window open and let the cold air drift in. Somewhere down on the street, a train shrieked against the tracks. Metal grinding on metal, unpolished and real. In the faint reflection on the glass, I caught a glimpse of someone I barely recognized. A woman who no longer needed to justify why she stood on her own. I picked up their letter one more time, folded the edges with slow, deliberate care, and slid it behind the frame of my degree. Not hidden, just placed exactly where it belonged. A record of what had been, and a marker of everything that had shifted. The room felt steadier. So did I. The silence around me wasn't hollow anymore. It felt like something I had worked for, something I had earned. Victory didn't sound like shouting or slamming doors. It sounded like a slow inhale in a quiet space. A kind of calm that arrives only when you stop waiting for approval that was never coming. Families fall apart in dramatic bursts, but the rebuilding happens in soft, private rooms. They removed my name from their story, but in doing so, they turned me into the detail they'll never completely erase. Not every ending arrives wrapped in forgiveness. Sometimes, the real ending is simply understanding, finally, fully, what someone could never give you. And if you've ever been the quiet one, the underestimated one, the one they assumed would always stay small, this part is for you. Stay until the last line, because sometimes silence isn't a retreat. Sometimes it's the strategy, and the stillness that follows is where you finally learn to breathe again.